Welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. Today I'm talking to Fiona about how she and her husband homeschooled their girls. It's an intuitive learning approach, taking natural, everyday life and play to learn. Some call this unschooling, but it's a broad and general category. For those of you who are curious about or already on the more freestyle unschooling route, I'm sure this will be the confidence boost and assurance you need. Well, how would you define your approach to schooling your girls?
For a start, we didn't send any of them to school, so we just sort of decided that we wanted to be responsible for their education. To me, it seemed a little odd to send our kids down the road to some school where people had decided that they must learn English, maths, science, these certain subjects. I mean, there's a million other things they could be learning. Why those particularly? And why the way they're taught? Wasn't there possibility to learn other things, and weren't other things more important in life? I guess we had fairly strong spiritual beliefs that we wanted our family to have, and I didn't know the character of the teacher. I didn't know what sort of ideas they might be putting in my child's head, and I just saw this, our oldest daughter, when she was like coming to 5, I thought, wow, she's like a sponge. She's going to go down to this classroom with this person that I know nothing about, all these other kids who've come from who knows what sort of influences they're going to have, and then I'm going to get my child back in our family home for a couple of hours a day, and my child will be a product of that. She was far too precious for me to want to do that, and I could also see she was this creative, spontaneous being, and I knew that school was going to knock that out of her, and I didn't want that. So I guess we wanted to just be in charge of how our children turned out in the end, because I felt like schools as an institution, they put children through and at the end they spit them out and they're in a certain form. Yeah, that's not what we wanted for our children. We wanted them to be, I believe each child has within them extreme uniqueness, and they need to be allowed to unfold as they are meant to. I guess a strong thread for us was the notion of freedom to be yourself, and freedom to do what you're interested in, freedom to be who you are in the world and contribute your gifts, and to be able to find those, because no one's telling you what to do. They wouldn't be able to think for themselves. They wouldn't know what was inside them. And I just felt that was super important to bring out. And I felt like home was the best place to do that, and within a loving family.
Did you realise then, before your children came along, that this was the route you were going to be going down? Or was it more of a growing awareness and decision you were making?
Actually, when I was in my late teens, I read a book about, I think it was called Children on the Hill. And it was a woman, I think, in Wales, and they didn't call it homeschooling, but she taught her children at home. I loved that book. It really had quite an impact on me. When our oldest daughter was quite little, 1 or 2, someone said to me one day something like, where will she be going to school? And I just said, I don't know if she will be going to school. And it sort of surprised me a little bit. I thought, yeah, actually, she might not. And also, I feel like I was a very sort of conscious parent. I was very conscious of the first few years of a child's development being super important to how they're going to be as an adult. And I think homeschooling was sort of just a continuum of that, of the way that we parented our kids. I had home births with all of them and carried them in a sling. I felt like the important thing was connection, was attachment, was letting the child be attached to the mother as long as they needed to be. And that would then foster independence, rather than pushing a child away and telling them they had to be independent, letting them be independent when they were able.
How did you go about implementing? You've already said that this Welsh woman became a mentor, really, through this book. How did you go about implementing, educating your girls?
I kind of, a lot of the time, let them be, to be honest. And I felt quite strongly that we have this child who learns to talk. We don't teach the child to talk. We talk to the child, it hears us, it learns to speak. The child also learns to walk. We're not forcing it to take steps before it's ready. We let the child do what it needs to in order to be able to walk. I just felt like that's how a child learns, naturally. And through observation and through learning and through having the right, kind of environment to be able to progress. And I also felt like I knew a child, if it's interested in something, it will learn naturally. Like a child, go back to the walking thing, a child wants to walk. Well, it will learn to walk because it's a strong impulse. And I know from my own experience, if I was interested in something, I can learn all sorts of things about it and become quite proficient at that thing. But if there was something I wasn't interested in, it didn't matter how much I put into that, I wasn't really taking it in. Well, one thing that I did was I read a lot to the girls from when they were babies. I talked a lot to them, poor things. I felt like I never spoke down to them as saying I would always treat them respectfully. And also involve them in my daily life. For example, going shopping, we would talk about prices and food and just talk about things that were happening. We would often seem to make a card for someone and send it. Well, then we'd write on the envelope. So I'd teach, they would learn to write. We'd go to the post office then and buy a stamp, and the child would be allowed to take the money in and go and buy it herself, kind of thing, just everyday things like that. And just encourage whatever the child was interested in. Like first daughter was very much into reading, from when she was maybe 4 or so, she would be very interested in words. So, I would encourage that. And if she wanted to, write her name, teach her to show her how to write her name. I didn't want to have to teach my kids to read. I had read different books about different ways people homeschooled, and I just wanted them to learn at their own pace. So with our first daughter, we would read lots of simple books and I would point to the words as I read. Then at one point, suddenly she could read. And that sort of blew me away a little bit because I thought, wow, that actually kind of works. Whatever we've been doing, she can read. And it was like she wasn't just reading "the cat is on the mat." She could read that, but she could also read the newspaper. And I thought, wow, okay, that's great. So also realise that each child is quite different. And just because, you think you've taught, you think what you've done has made this child read like that at an early age, that's not nothing to do with me, but it's more about the child. With all of our 4, 2 read quite early and 2 read quite late, so-called. But say by age 13, they could all read the same. Do you know what I mean?
So your second daughter, did you worry in there? Or to put it in a more stronger term, how did you not panic?
I knew she was an intelligent being. I knew she was very bright. I mean, she started speaking quite early. She just really didn't want to sit still. She liked being read to, but she just wasn't really interested. Because something happened at the library. They were doing some library program. Maybe they got something when they got a certain number of points and they got a toy. I can't remember what it was actually. What happened with her is she had then this goal, and so she wanted to learn to read. And so she was able to read relatively quickly because she had something that she wanted to do it for. Now, as an adult, I can see, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense. If she really likes something, she put in the effort. I had read books about other homeschooling families whose kids didn't read till quite late. And actually in one of them there was this wonderful example of a family who had a child who was maybe 10 or so and wasn't reading, but the others in the family were, or maybe the younger ones were even. And one day they were doing some cooking. So they needed, maybe it was cinnamon. So the girl who can read goes to the cupboard and grabs a thing that says cinnamon and is going to put it in the cake. The child who can't read says, that's not cinnamon, because they smelt it and said, that's not cinnamon. That to me was quite amazing.
And was she correct? It wasn't
No,
cinnamon?
she was correct. It wasn't cinnamon. The child who couldn't read had this other way of being that worked well for her. Just that we put so much emphasis on things like reading, but do you actually know? So I tried not to. Maybe I did worry a little now and again. I mean, all throughout the homeschooling, every so often I would go, what am I doing? Is this going to work? Am I doing the right thing?
Well, you were normal then. You did worry at times.
Gosh, yeah. Heck. And then I was thinking, no, look. And then something would happen and go, okay, it's fine. Don't worry, it's fine. And maybe I'd read something about a woman, I think had 3 or 4 sons. 2 were adopted. These boys all went to, that is in the States, I think it was Harvard. It was one of the big universities. They all got into Harvard, which is quite impressive on that level. And they had been pretty much unschooled. And one of her boys, I remember, she was busy. I think they were homesteading or something. She was very busy doing something. and he had not been wanting to read, and so she just left it because she knew that when he was ready he would. And then something happened, like maybe he got a telescope or something that he had to put together, and he had to read the instructions. And so I think that inspired that child to read, because he wanted something badly enough. That was an interesting book for me because it wasn't necessarily a hereditary thing that these kids were super smart, because 2 were adopted into that family. So the way that they did things obviously got the children to a level where they could go to a prestigious university if they wanted to.
The category of unschooling, it's unfortunate in a way because it does have perceptions.
Yeah.
Any category does, because people automatically think something. So how you and John, your husband, educated your girls seems to fit nicely into that category of unschooling, if you like. But other people looking in, because they think it's just letting your child do whatever they like, and what are you going to do? Because if they watch videos all day or play on their computers all day, that would never work, blah, blah, blah. So if a parent is attracted to the way that you have been talking, but they know that their relationship with their child just might end up going down with the child just simply not cooperating and sitting all day on their computer, what has to come first in the philosophy or the way you're thinking in order for your approach to be successful?
Yes, that's true. I wouldn't have been happy if the child had said, I'm just going to play video games all day. I guess it just depends on your family and what your values are. We have strong values as a family, honesty and trust and compassion and different things, and that we would just expect the children to encompass those values, if you like. Okay, so our oldest daughter at one point, maybe when she was 8 or 9, she would read and read and read and read and do nothing else. And that concerned me a little bit because I thought it's wonderful that she's reading, but I don't want her, 1, to ruin her eyes, and 2, I think she should be doing some other things, not just reading. In the end, I had to limit her time on reading. So I would say, look, you can read for an hour and then you go and do something else. I don't mind what it is, you go and find something else to do. And so that was a bit of a joke because some people say, how do you get your child to read? And I was saying, well, I'm having trouble stopping mine, I just love that they had these things that they did like that. And I think they must have, I don't know what they were learning, but I know they were learning such a lot through the play. Yeah, I think that was vital, the play.
The value of play, not just when they're little. It tends to be kind of discouraged as they get older.
Yeah. I saw something the other day, a quote somewhere saying, if you want to build a new sort of synapse in your brain, it takes something like 100 repetitions for it to make one. But it only takes something like a much smaller number, maybe 30, if it's through play. And I thought, wow, that's why kids have to play. And they need to almost be left alone so that they can kind of be bored and then have to find something to do.
You stop organising their life with them.
Yeah, and stop giving them junk that has such a narrow function. It doesn't matter what it might have been something else for another child. It could be sticks or something, but they use their imaginations, and be kids. Be kids.
The value of play. There was a saying, I don't know where it originated from, but it went something like, a child's play is his work.
Yeah.
Give them things to play with because that becomes how they learn.
Absolutely. When they're little, they'll repeat things over and over and over till they've got what they need to get. We don't know what they need to get, but they do. And if you just let them play, I think it's really important. And also they learn the cooperation, playing with each other, and build strong relationships.
It sounds to me like you could be saying that they're inseparable, the relationship you have with the child and your approach to homeschooling. But your methodology for parenting sounds to me like it's foundational, that that's what you need to build on and make strong first.
Right.
Because if that's not a good relationship, or the child doesn't respect you or doesn't respond, having a more open approach to schooling probably isn't going to work very well.
You're still in charge. You're still the parent. You still are in charge. And there are still things that you say no to. If they want to go to the fridge and eat all the ice cream, I'm not going to say, yes, you can do that. I'll say, you can have a spoonful now. It's not just you let the child go to the fridge and eat the whole tub of ice cream, because that's not good for the child.
Well, you referred to some of these books that you had read earlier, which in a way resourced you. Now, earlier you mentioned that if they wanted to write a letter, they that's what they would write on. They'd write on an envelope. So did you ever get for them a writing book and say, here, I want you to write a sentence about where we've just been today? So how did you approach other written work?
Coming back to that letter, I think that would be the first thing that they would learn, was writing on a card to someone, dear someone, thank you for the thing, or happy birthday, or those kind of things, or writing a letter to a grandparent. They would want to write things or make up stories, and I would encourage that, and maybe I would say, let's write a story. I'll write the first line, you write the next one. We'd sort of play games and do things like that. And at a certain age, I would encourage them to keep a diary. And so we did have different workbooks that I would buy every so often, and some of those would be used and some of them wouldn't. So I don't know if that's a very unschooling thing to do, to give them workbooks. And sometimes I would ask for it. Yeah, it would kind of happen fairly naturally, and I feel like things like that do happen naturally if the child is left to their own devices, because they will soon want to write, they will need to write something, and then they will probably enjoy it.
It's reassuring for families who are attracted to this way of educating. And for you to now, at the end of your homeschooling years, how old are your girls now?
19, 22, 24 and 29.
And you homeschooled right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And you did what would be roughly called an unschooling approach.
I guess.
That kind of works with being unschooling, doesn't it? Yeah. Because we want to pursue in the world what is actually real, not what other people have decided. Yeah. No boxes. Exactly. So, looking back now over the years, are you satisfied with the outcome? Can you see, you tell me how it is. I won't put words in your mouth.
Yeah. Well, it is very interesting looking back. It is sort of with relief that I must say that I feel that what we did worked for us. And I must also say that along the way, if they suddenly wanted to do something that was, not unschooly, well, I'd be quite prepared to do that. It wasn't like I was stuck on one path. No, I feel that what we have done has worked, because each of them has been allowed to follow their passion, and that was what one of our main things was, to let them follow their passions and see where that took them. I feel they each have strong characters. They're loving and they're kind. Yeah, they get on well with people and they're pretty happy people. And so at one point, two of the girls, they got up every morning at 8 o'clock with their little workbooks, went to the table, and they wanted to do an hour of schoolwork. And this was nothing to do with me. This is just what they wanted to do. And they loved it. And they did this for maybe it was a couple of weeks. And then it petered off and they didn't do it again. But things like that would happen along the journey, and I would suddenly think then, oh my gosh, I've been sort of unschooling these kids, and now they want school at home. And then I was a bit afraid that this was going to be our life, that I would have to become a school teacher, which I wasn't that keen on. What my goal always was, and what I feel I did, I would never say I taught the girls. I was the facilitator of their education. And that's really important to me, because our main thing is to facilitate them in their education. And when I say education, it really just means their lives. It's not really education and then the rest of their lives. They're still learning things now, as am I. And so people would say, well, how do you teach subjects to your children? You don't have to know. You just have to know how to facilitate them to learn, because the homeschooling journey for us was all about learning rather than teaching. If there was something I felt they needed to learn, well, I would bring that in, but I wouldn't shove it down their throats. And so with our oldest daughter, when she was tiny, she danced all the time. And I'm going, oh, maybe she'll be a dancer when she grows up. And she still dances today, but she never became a professional dancer. So when she was around her early teens, probably a little bit before, she was on her sewing machine constantly. She was interested in clothes. We bought her this old sewing machine, and honestly, that thing was going day after day. And she became very proficient in sewing. Then she did a fashion design course, and then she worked in the fashion industry for a time. At the course she did very well, and it looked like she was going to become this fashion designer. But also at that same time, she was volunteering at Youthline, becoming a phone counsellor volunteer. Then as she went on with her job, she got a little bit disillusioned, I think, with how the work was going and how the people were. She was getting more passionate about counselling kind of stuff that she was learning about. And so she decided to go to university and study, and did a psychology and anthropology degree. just giving that example, it looked like her passion was dancing, and then it seemed like her passion was fashion. Then she went in a completely sort of different tangent, and she's on that tangent still and loves it. You need to be open to what your kids, they might have just had enough of this thing and they've learned what they need to learn from it, so there's something else. I feel it's important to be open to letting them just run with their passion as far as it goes.
Is there something you can think about that is important to tell parents who will be seriously considering the unschooling idea?
Make sure that if you're thinking about unschooling, that it's something that really comes from you, that it's really what you want for your kids, and that you're able to let them be without trying to control what they want to do, sort of thing. Because I feel like that kind of thing only works if you really let the child go for what they want, step back a little bit and just see what comes out of the child, and be very conscious of that, of seeing what comes out of the child, not what you want to come out of the child, not what you think is best for that child, not what you want that child to look like because it's your child. Yeah, it's like when our oldest daughter was about 3, we weren't just letting her do whatever she wanted, but at one point she was kind of stroppy and she said something to me, or maybe it was like I asked her to do something and she said, no, I don't want to do that, or she said something to me and I just thought, what? I would never have spoken like that to my parents. And then I laughed and said to my husband, well, we brought her up like this. This is what we brought her up as, because we actually want her to question, give a reason why she can't or doesn't want to do that. And so that was quite a moment for me to see that actually what we were doing was actually kind of working, but we wanted her and our children to have different relationships than we had with our parents.
And I'm sure you're talking about focusing on yourself as the parent before you can. It really is how things sit with you. If you're not actually comfortable with a more relaxed unschooling approach, then you shouldn't really be doing it. It's not going to work so much. So before we bring the interview to a close, I've got one last question for you. Now, I realised that you had almost decided that you were going to keep your girls at home from go, but if you could time travel and take yourself back to the young Fiona who was really just starting out, what would you tell her?
I think I would just say, just relax. It's okay. It's going to be fine in the end. It's going to work out. Keep following your intuition and keep following your heart, and it will be fine. And I might say also, it'd be quite helpful. I would have quite liked you to have written some diaries, maybe weekly or monthly, that I could read now. It'd be quite good.
Because you would enjoy it now.
Yeah, because I'd enjoy it now.
Okay.
It would be kind of nice to have kept a bit of track of things that we did.
Thank you so much, Fiona.
Thank you.
I'm grateful to Fiona for not only her time, but her generosity in wanting to pass on valuable experience and wisdom. It feels to me like this interview has just scratched the surface, and there is clearly scope for more in-depth and detailed episodes. Please send me questions and thoughts on what you'd like to know more about. You can contact me in the comments area below or via my website, which is regularly being updated with homeschooling resources. So that more homeschoolers hear valuable information in my podcast, please like, subscribe, comment and share. I'll catch you next week.